"I'm sorry, I can't afford this date," she whispered to the single dad. But what he did next changed everything. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Devin Martinez sat across from Liam Parker at a small Italian restaurant in downtown Portland on a Friday night in late September. And this was their first actual in-person date after 2 weeks of texting that had made her laugh more than she'd laughed in months. And she was trying really hard not to panic about the fact that she just ordered the cheapest pasta on the menu and water instead of soda, because her bank account was running on fumes, and she was silently praying this dinner wouldn't cost more than $35 for her half. Here's the thing about meeting someone on a dating app. When your friends literally set up your profile because they said you worked too much and needed to put yourself out there, you spend 2 weeks building this person up in your head through messages and photos and voice notes, and then you finally meet face to face, and you're terrified they're going to take one look at the real you and realize you're not nearly as interesting as your carefully curated text personality suggested. But Liam had walked into the restaurant at 7:15 exactly on time, wearing jeans and a button-down that wasn't fancy but was clearly ironed. And he'd smiled at her like he was just as nervous as she was. And within 10 minutes of sitting down, Devin realized that the guy she'd been texting was actually even better in person, because he listened when she talked and asked follow-up questions and didn't check his phone even once. They talked about everything. Devin told him about working the counter at Flower and Fire Bakery for the past 5 years and how she could decorate a cake blindfolded at this point. And Liam told her about his small startup developing educational apps for kids and how he was basically running on coffee and hope most days trying to make it work while raising his 6-year-old twin daughters Ava and Mia by himself. "So you're telling me you write code and do bedtime stories and remember to pack lunches that aren't just Pop-Tarts?" Devin said it with a smile, and Liam laughed. "I'm telling you that I try to do all that and I fail at least 40% of the time. Last week I sent them to school with lunches and forgot to actually put food in the lunch boxes. Just sent them with empty containers like some kind of cruel experiment." They were both cracking up, and the conversation just flowed easy, like they'd known each other way longer than 2 weeks of app messages. And Devin was thinking, okay, maybe my friends were right. Maybe I did need to put myself out there, because this feels really, really good. And then the waiter brought the check, and Devin's entire world tilted sideways. The total was $68, which meant her half was $34, and Devin pulled out her debit card trying to look casual, while her brain was doing frantic math about her bank account balance. She'd had about $90 in there this morning, but her rent had auto-paid today, and her younger brother had texted yesterday with an emergency about needing money for textbooks, and she'd sent him 40 through Venmo without checking her balance first, because that's what you do when family needs help. She handed her card to the waiter with a smile that felt plastic on her face, and when he came back 2 minutes later and said quietly, "Ma'am, your card was declined. Do you have another form of payment?" Devin felt her face go so hot she thought she might actually catch fire right there at the table. "Oh, let me try again. Sometimes it does that." And her voice came out shaky, and she was lying, because her card never just randomly declined. It declined because there was no money in the account. And she tried again, knowing it wouldn't work, but needing to do something. And the waiter's face got sympathetic in that horrible way that made everything worse. "Still not going through. Do you have cash or another card?" Devin grabbed her wallet and counted out $12 in crumpled bills, all the cash she had to her name until next Friday's paycheck, and she felt tears starting in her eyes, because this was literally her nightmare scenario playing out in real time on a first date with a guy she actually really liked. Liam was watching this happen, and Devin couldn't even look at him. She leaned across the table and whispered so quietly she wasn't sure he'd even hear her. "I'm so sorry. I can't afford this date. My card got declined, and I only have $12 cash. I thought I had enough, but my rent went through today, and I didn't check, and I'm so embarrassed I could just die right here." And she was full-on crying now, tears running down her face in the middle of this restaurant, and she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole, because nothing says great first impression like sobbing over a declined debit card. Liam didn't say anything for a second, and Devin was sure he was calculating the fastest way to get away from this disaster of a human being. But then he reached across the table and put his hand over hers and said in this really gentle voice, "Hey, look at me for a second." Devin looked up, expecting to see pity or judgment or disgust. But Liam's face was just kind, and he squeezed her hand and said, "This happens to literally everyone. It's not a big deal. Let me get this one, okay?" And he pulled out his own card and handed it to the waiter before Devin could even protest. "Liam, no you can't. We were supposed to split it. This is so humiliating." And her voice was still shaking, but Liam shook his head. "You want to hear something that'll make you feel better about this? Last month, my startup's payroll system glitched, and everyone's checks bounced, including mine, and I had to call my mom and borrow $300 so I could buy groceries for my kids. I'm 36 years old, and I had to ask my mother for grocery money, so trust me, I understand how this feels." They left the restaurant after Liam paid, and Devin was still mortified but also confused because he wasn't running away. He was suggesting they walk to the bench outside instead of ending the night, and they sat down on this wooden bench under a streetlight. And Devin said, "I need you to know I'm not usually this much of a mess. I work full-time, and I budget, and I try really hard, but my little brother's in college, and my parents can't help him. So I do, and sometimes the math just doesn't work out, and I end up short." Liam turned to face her on the bench. "Devin, I'm going to be real honest with you because we just went through something really vulnerable in there. And I think we're past the point of pretending we have our lives all figured out. My startup is barely profitable. I'm still paying off medical bills from when my wife Rachel was sick 2 years ago before she passed. I drive a car that's held together with duct tape and prayer. And last week I had to choose between fixing my laptop or buying the twins new shoes, and I chose the laptop because I need it for work and felt like garbage about it." Devin stared at him because she just assumed that a guy who owned his own company, even a small one, would have his financial life together. And here he was telling her he was basically in the same boat she was, just trying to keep his head above water and doing his best with what he had. "So you're not secretly judging me for being broke?" Devin asked, and Liam laughed. "I'm secretly relieved that you're broke too because it means you get it. You understand what it's like to work your butt off and still come up short sometimes. And honestly, that's more attractive to me than any perfectly curated dating profile could ever be." They sat there on that bench talking for another hour about real stuff, about student loans and credit card debt, and the cost of childcare, and how expensive just existing seemed to be. And somewhere in that conversation, Devin realized she'd never felt more seen by another person in her entire life. Around 9:30, Liam said, "Can we do this again? But next time, let's do something free, like a picnic in the park. I'll bring sandwiches, nothing fancy, just like PB and J level stuff." And Devin smiled for the first time since the card declined. "I can bring bakery leftovers from work. We get to take home whatever doesn't sell. I'll bring the dessert and we can trade." Liam's whole face lit up. "That sounds perfect. Way better than spending money we don't have trying to impress each other." And then he leaned in and kissed her, just soft and sweet under the streetlight. And Devin kissed him back, thinking that she'd just had the most embarrassing moment of her dating life, and somehow it had turned into the most honest conversation she'd ever had. And maybe that was worth way more than being able to afford an expensive dinner. They stood up to leave, and Liam said, "For what it's worth, the fact that you're helping your brother through school when you're barely making it yourself says everything about who you are. And Devin, that's someone really special." And Devin felt tears again, but good ones this time. "For what it's worth, the fact that you're raising twin girls alone and building a business and still making time to go on awkward first dates with broke bakery workers says everything about you too." They walked to their cars parked on opposite sides of the street, and before Devin got in, Liam called out, "Hey Devin, next Friday, Laurelhurst Park, noon, bring whatever cookies didn't sell. I'll bring sandwiches that are probably mediocre." And Devin yelled back, "It's a date. And Liam, thank you for not making me feel like a complete disaster tonight." And Liam grinned. "You're not a disaster. You're just honest. And that's better than perfect any day of the week." Devin drove home to her tiny studio apartment that cost too much and had a weird smell she couldn't identify. And she sat in her car for a few minutes before going inside, just thinking about how she'd spent 2 weeks being terrified of this date. And it had gone completely sideways in the worst possible way. And somehow she was sitting here, feeling more hopeful about her love life than she had in years, because Liam Parker had seen her at her absolute lowest, and instead of running, he'd pulled up a bench and stayed. And maybe that was exactly the kind of person worth taking a chance on, even when your bank account said you couldn't afford to take chances on anything. The next 6 weeks turned into the best dating experience Devin had ever had, and it didn't cost either of them more than about $20 total, and that's including the time Liam bought ice cream cones from a food truck and insisted on paying the whole $4 like he was some kind of high roller. Their second date was that picnic at Laurelhurst Park, where Devin brought a box of day-old croissants and chocolate chip cookies from the bakery, and Liam showed up with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches cut into triangles, like he was packing lunch for his kids. And they sat on a blanket laughing about how this was possibly the most budget-friendly romantic picnic in the history of Portland dating. They did free museum days and walked around Powell's bookstore without buying anything, just reading covers out loud to each other, cooked dinner at Liam's apartment, using whatever was on sale at the grocery store that week, and Devin started keeping a list on her phone of every single free event happening in the city, so they'd never run out of things to do that didn't require money neither of them had. 3 weeks into this whole thing, Liam asked if Devin wanted to meet his daughters, said the twins had been asking about the lady who brings the good cookies, and Devin's stomach absolutely dropped because meeting the kids felt huge and also terrifying, because what if they hated her? Or what if she said something wrong? Or what if they compared her to their mom and she came up short? She showed up at Liam's apartment on a Saturday morning with a bag of cookie decorating supplies from the bakery, stuff that was going to get tossed anyway, so her manager let her take it home. And the second she walked in, two identical little girls with dark curly hair and missing front teeth came barreling at her screaming, "You're Devin! Dad said you make the best cookies in the whole world." Ava and Mia were absolute tornadoes of energy, talking over each other and showing Devin every single toy they owned and asking approximately 900 questions in the first 5 minutes. And Liam just stood in the kitchen doorway, watching with this soft smile on his face, mouthing, "I'm sorry," while his daughters gave Devin the full interrogation. They spent the afternoon decorating sugar cookies, and the twins got more frosting on themselves than on the actual cookies. And at one point, Mia looked up at Devin very seriously and said, "Dad's last girlfriend used to bring us presents every time she came over, like toys from the fancy store." And Devin felt her chest get tight because she couldn't afford to buy these kids presents. She was showing up with bakery leftovers and borrowed decorating supplies. Ava elbowed her sister. "Dad said we're not supposed to talk about Jessica." And Liam walked over looking uncomfortable. "Girls, that's not. We don't need to compare people, okay?" But the damage was already done. Devin was spiraling in her head thinking about some other woman who apparently dated Liam and could afford to show up with fancy store-bought gifts, while Devin was over here with day-old cookies like some kind of budget version of a girlfriend. The next 2 weeks, Devin couldn't shake this feeling of not being enough. She'd see cute things she wanted to buy for the twins and then look at her bank account and feel like a failure. And she started pulling back a little bit without meaning to, taking longer to answer Liam's texts and making excuses about being tired when he suggested hanging out. What Devin didn't know was that Liam was dealing with his own crisis. His startup had just lost their biggest client, the company that was responsible for about 60% of his revenue, and he was looking at possibly having to shut down the whole business and go get a regular job with a steady paycheck. And the idea of failing at the thing he'd poured 3 years of his life into was absolutely crushing him. He didn't tell Devin because he didn't want to dump more stress on her when she was already struggling, and also because some stupid part of his brain thought she'd leave if she realized he might not even have a business in a few months. So instead, he just started canceling their free dates, claiming he had too much work. Stayed up until 2 in the morning every night trying to find new clients and figure out how to save his company. By mid-November, they'd barely seen each other in 2 weeks, and Ava asked at breakfast, "Dad, how come Devin doesn't come over anymore? Did we do something wrong?" And Liam felt like the worst father on the planet. "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. I've just been really busy with work." But Mia wasn't buying it. "You're always busy with work, but Devin used to come over anyway. Did you guys break up?" Liam didn't have a good answer because he wasn't even sure what was happening. They hadn't officially broken up, but they also weren't really together if they never saw each other. And he realized he was doing the exact same thing he'd promised not to do. He was hiding his struggles instead of being honest about them. Devin was having the same realization in her tiny studio apartment, staring at her phone and trying to decide if she should just ask Liam straight out if he was done with her, or if she should keep pretending everything was fine. And finally, she decided she was too old and too tired to play games. If he wanted out, he could just say it to her face. She showed up at Liam's apartment on a Tuesday night unannounced, and when he opened the door looking exhausted and confused, she didn't even let him say hello before she started talking. "Look, if you're done with me, just say it, okay? I'm a big girl. I can handle rejection, but I can't handle this weird slow fade where you cancel everything and barely text me back. Just be honest with me, Liam." And her voice cracked on his name because she was angrier than she wanted to be and also sad and confused. Liam stood there in his doorway, looking like he'd been hit with a brick. "What are you talking about? I'm not trying to fade on you." And Devin laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Really? Because we haven't had an actual conversation in 2 weeks? You've canceled our last 4 plans, and I'm standing here feeling like I'm bothering you just by existing." Liam ran his hands through his hair and looked like he was going to be sick. "Devin, God, this is not how I wanted to tell you this. My startup is failing. I lost my biggest client 3 weeks ago, and I don't know if I can keep the business running. I might have to shut it all down and go get some regular job and admit that I failed at the thing I've been killing myself to build for 3 years. Devin's anger evaporated instantly and turned into something that felt a lot like hurt. "Why didn't you tell me? Did you think I couldn't handle knowing you were struggling?" And Liam looked at the floor. "I thought you deserved someone who had their life together. Someone stable, not a guy whose business is circling the drain." Devin stepped closer, and her voice came out sharp. "What I deserve is someone who's honest with me. Someone who doesn't make decisions about our relationship without actually talking to me. Liam, I've been over here thinking you were pulling away because I'm not good enough, because I can't afford to buy your kids presents like your ex-girlfriend apparently could." Liam's head snapped up. "Wait, what? Devin, that's not. Jessica was months ago, and it didn't work out because she didn't understand my life. She thought throwing money at problems was the same as actually caring." And Devin felt tears starting. "Well, I can't throw money at anything, Liam. I'm broke. I work at a bakery and live in a studio that smells weird, and I help support my brother. I don't have anything fancy to offer you or your daughters." They stood there in his doorway, both looking miserable. And finally Liam said, "Can you come inside so my neighbors don't hear us having a breakdown in the hallway?" And Devin nodded and walked into his apartment, where the twins were supposedly asleep but were definitely listening from the top of the stairs. They sat on Liam's beat-up couch that he'd bought secondhand off Craigslist. And Liam took Devin's hands and said, "I'm sorry I shut you out. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really just protecting my own ego. I didn't want you to see me fail." And Devin squeezed his hands back. "Liam, I watched my own debit card get declined on our first date. You think I'm going to judge you for business problems? We're both out here just trying to make it work with what we've got." They talked for 2 hours about everything, about Liam's client crisis and Devin's insecurity about money, and how they'd both been hiding their struggles instead of sharing them like actual partners should. And somewhere around midnight, they made a decision that felt scary and necessary. They were going to stop pretending they had everything figured out and start actually building something real together. "So what does that look like?" Devin asked, and Liam thought about it. "It looks like I tell you when I'm stressed about money, and you tell me when you're feeling insecure, and we figure out solutions together instead of separately. It looks like we're actually honest even when it's hard." Devin leaned her head on his shoulder. "I can do honest is way easier than trying to pretend I'm someone I'm not." And Liam kissed the top of her head. "You said something at the restaurant that first night about us both being broke. What if we just committed to that? What if we're broke together and we make it work anyway?" From the stairs, they heard Mia's voice yell, "Does this mean Devin's coming back over? Because I miss her." And both adults started laughing, and Liam called up, "Yes, Bug, Devin's coming back over. Now go to sleep before I come up there." Devin left around 1 in the morning, and Liam walked her to her car. And before she got in, she turned and said, "For the record, I don't care if your startup fails or succeeds. I care about you, The person who makes terrible sandwiches and raises awesome kids and thinks cheap picnics are romantic. That's who I'm here for. And Liam felt something in his chest crack open. And for the record, you being broke doesn't make you less than anything. You're out here working full-time and helping your family and still showing up for my kids with cookies and kindness? Devin, you're not the budget version of a girlfriend. You're the real deal. 4 months went by and Devin and Liam figured out what being broke together actually looked like in practice. And it turned out it looked a lot like sharing a single Netflix account and meal planning together on Sundays to stretch their grocery budgets and teaching Ava and Mia about saving money in mason jars they decorated with stickers. Devin basically lived at Liam's apartment at this point, even though she still paid rent on her studio because breaking a lease cost money neither of them had. And she'd wake up at 5 in the morning to get to her bakery shift while Liam got the twins ready for school. And they had this rhythm going that felt less like dating and more like actually building a life together, one really small, budget-friendly decision at a time. They had a shared spreadsheet where they tracked every dollar, not because either of them was controlling, but because they'd both learned the hard way that ignoring money problems didn't make them disappear. And there was something weirdly intimate about sitting on the couch with your partner, going through bank statements and figuring out where you could cut $5 here or $10 there. Mid-March, Liam got a phone call that made him literally jump off the couch and scare the crap out of everyone in the apartment. He'd landed a new client for his startup, not huge but steady, a school district that wanted to use his educational app for their special needs program, and it was a 2-year contract that would actually let him pay himself a real salary instead of just scraping by. He was practically crying while he told Devin, "It's not going to make us rich. We're still going to be budgeting and clipping coupons and doing free date nights, but I don't have to shut down the business. I can actually keep doing this." And Devin threw her arms around him right there in the kitchen, while the twins cheered because they didn't fully understand what was happening, but they knew their dad was happy. 2 weeks after that, Devin got called into her manager's office at the bakery, and she spent the whole walk back thinking she was getting fired for something, but instead her manager offered her a promotion to shift supervisor, $3 more an hour plus benefits. And Devin had to sit down because $3 an hour didn't sound like much. But when you did the math, it was an extra $120 a week. And that was the difference between barely surviving and actually having a tiny bit of breathing room. They celebrated both wins with a fancy dinner at home, which meant Liam cooked pasta that wasn't instant ramen, and Devin brought home a cake from the bakery that had a tiny spelling mistake so they couldn't sell it. And the twins got to stay up an extra hour, and nobody spent more than $15 total. But it felt like the most extravagant celebration either of them had ever had. That night after the girls went to bed, Liam pulled Devin onto the couch and said, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." And Devin's heart started racing because that sentence never led anywhere good. But Liam was smiling, so she didn't panic yet. "I want to marry you," he said straight out, no fancy lead up. "But I can't afford a ring right now. I've got maybe $200 saved up, and I know that's not enough for something you'd want to wear forever. So I guess I'm asking if you'd be okay waiting until I can actually do this right?" Devin felt tears starting, and she laughed at the same time. "Liam Parker, are you seriously asking my permission to propose to me later, when you have more money?" And Liam looked embarrassed. "When you say it like that, it sounds stupid. But yeah, I guess I am." And Devin grabbed his face with both hands. "I don't need you to wait. I don't need an expensive ring. I need you to ask me whenever you're ready because the answer is going to be yes, either way." They sat there grinning at each other like complete idiots until they heard footsteps on the stairs, and Ava appeared in her pajamas, looking very serious for a 6-year-old at 9:30 at night. "Dad, can we talk to you about something important? Me and Mia have been discussing." And she said discussing like she just learned the word and wanted to use it. And Liam called Mia down, and both twins stood in the living room in their matching unicorn pajamas, looking like they were about to deliver a presentation. Mia went first. "We know you want to marry Devin because we heard you talking just now. We weren't spying. We just came down for water." And Ava jumped in. "And we think you should use Mom's ring, the one in your drawer, because Mom's not here anymore. And Devin makes you smile like Mom used to, so she should have the pretty ring." Liam looked like someone had punched all the air out of his lungs. And Devin was full on crying now because these two little girls were basically giving their permission and offering their mom's ring. And Liam's voice came out all shaky when he said, "You guys really think that's what mom would want?" Ava nodded very seriously. "Dad, you always say mom said family is the most important thing. And Devin's our family now. So mom would want her to have the pretty ring." The next Friday evening, Liam told Devin to meet him somewhere. Wouldn't say where, just gave her an address. And when she got there, she realized it was the Italian restaurant where they'd had their first date. The place where her card had declined and she'd thought her life was ending. Liam was standing outside by the same bench where they'd sat and talked for an hour after the disaster dinner, and he was holding a small box and looking nervous enough to pass out. Devin walked over, and before she could even say hello, Liam started talking. "So I was going to plan this whole elaborate thing, and then I realized that's not us. We're not elaborate. We're sitting on benches outside restaurants and being honest about struggling. So I figured I'd bring you back to where it all started, the place where you told me you couldn't afford dinner, and I realized I just met the most real person I'd ever known." He got down on one knee right there on the sidewalk, and people walking by stopped to watch. And Liam opened the box to show a simple silver ring with a small diamond that caught the streetlight. "This was Rachel's ring, and Ava and Mia asked me to give it to you because they said their mom would want you to have it. And Devin, I know we're both still broke and still figuring things out, and probably will be for a while, but I can't afford to wait anymore to ask you this. Will you marry me? Will you keep being broke with me and building this life with me and helping me raise these two crazy girls who already love you?" Devin was sobbing so hard she could barely see the ring. "Yes, oh my God, yes, 1,000 times. Yes, I don't care about being broke as long as I'm broke with you." And Liam stood up and slid the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly. And everyone on the sidewalk started clapping and cheering. And Devin kissed him, thinking about how far they'd come from that first awful, embarrassing date to this moment right here. They got married 4 months later in July at the courthouse on a Tuesday afternoon because it was cheaper than a weekend, and Devin wore a white dress she found at a thrift store for $30. And Liam wore the same button-down shirt he'd worn on their first date because Devin said it was lucky. Ava and Mia were flower girls in matching purple dresses that Devin's mom had made, and the whole ceremony took maybe 10 minutes. And when the judge said, "You may kiss your bride," Liam dipped Devin like they were in some old movie, and the twins screamed, "Gross, but also yay!" The reception was a potluck in Laurelhurst Park, the same park where they'd had their second date. And Devin's bakery co-workers brought a beautiful 3-tier cake they'd made as a wedding gift, and Liam's app developer friends brought enough food to feed everyone twice. And his mom kept crying happy tears and saying, "I knew you two were perfect for each other," the first time Liam mentioned the girl whose card declined. They were standing by the cake table watching Ava and Mia run around with the other kids, and Mia came running up sweaty and grass-stained and asked completely out of nowhere, "Mom, Devin, are we rich now that you and Dad got married? My friend says when people get married, they get rich." And Devin knelt down to her level. "No, sweetie, we're definitely not rich. We're still going to budget and save and be careful with money." And Mia's face fell a little bit until Liam added, "But we're rich in the ways that actually matter, Bug. We've got each other, and that's worth more than any amount of money in the bank." Ava ran over and joined the hug. "Plus, we have cake, and cake makes everyone rich." And all four of them cracked up laughing, and Devin looked up at Liam over their daughters' heads and mouthed, "I love you." And he mouthed back, "I love you more." And Ava said without looking up, "I love you most, so I win again." Later that night, after all the guests had left and they'd cleaned up the park and taken the twins back to Liam's apartment, which was now officially Devin's apartment too, they stood in the kitchen doing dishes together, still in their wedding clothes, and Devin said, "You know what's funny? Less than a year ago, I thought being broke meant I had nothing to offer anyone. And now here I am, married to the guy who saw me at my lowest and stuck around anyway." Liam dried a plate and put it away. "Less than a year ago, I thought being broke meant I had nothing to offer anyone. Turns out being broke just meant I had to offer the real stuff, the honest stuff. And that's what you wanted all along." And Devin leaned against him. "Best declined debit card of my life." Sometimes the most embarrassing moments lead to the most beautiful lives. Devin thought she'd ruined everything when she whispered those words across the dinner table. "I can't afford this date." But what she'd actually done was found someone who understood that wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in honesty and partnership and building something real together, even when the budget says you can't afford to build anything at all. They were both still broke by most people's standards, still clipping coupons and doing free activities and checking their bank balances before every purchase. But they were doing it together, and they were teaching Ava and Mia that having enough is different from having everything. And that love doesn't cost a thing, but it's worth absolutely everything. If this story reminded you that being honest about your struggles is braver than pretending you're perfect, that the right person won't run when they see the real you, and that sometimes the best relationships are built on shared struggles instead of shared wealth, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear that you don't have to have it all figured out to deserve love. Thanks for being here with us. And remember, being broke together beats being fake and comfortable any day of the week.